Hey folks, I had a different video planned for today, but this one was, I think, too tragically smug to pass up. Today we're going to be responding to a YouTuber called Rags, who I guess has been subscribed to my channel for the last 2 or so years. If you were keeping me in your back pocket for potential future content, I guess here you go. Or don't do that. Based on the quality of this video, it seems like I could say complete nonsense drivel the entire time and you would still somehow manage to make yourself look like a complete ass in response. As always, we will not be responding to the entirety of this video. In fact, we'll be only covering about half of it. There will be arguments and sub-arguments that I skip over. Feel free to assume that I agree with all of them if it helps you sleep at night. Rags is responding here to a video by the YouTuber Skitty Bitty, who I have interacted with very briefly once on a live stream, but do not know on any level besides that. I have not spoken to them in any way about this, and they do not endorse anything that I say here. That video is titled Anti-Woke Gamers Are the Weakest Link, and here is Rags' opening argument.
I have my pronouns in my bio.
Cringe.
This has made a number of supposedly rational people very angry.
Are they really angry, or are they just poking fun at you? Let's see what they say. Your voice is annoying, and the fact that you are a they-them gives you no credibility at all. You are the definition of cringe. Puke. Yeah, this doesn't sound very angry. They just sound annoyed. This video would be better if she wasn't gay. That doesn't sound very angry.
I play you this for context for his future point, not necessarily to refute this. Just note that at present in this video, Rags purports to believe that his subject is describing these comments as angry and that they are blatantly wrong for doing so.
And I can't help but recall the way the word triggered was plastered over titles and thumbnails alike when I was younger.
Oh, okay. You're trying to connect these as like being the same thing. Oh, what an incredibly stupid thing to do, you fool. You see, have you seen some of those videos about the crazy triggered people, the feminist owned or triggered feminists? Do you ever watch any of those videos? Those are unhinged. Those people are crazy. They're yelling, they're screaming, they're pulling fire alarms, they're going on these insane tirades, and many of them are doing that like IRL. This isn't some mildly perturbed YouTube comment. This is like an actual real life freak out.
All right, 2 points here. One, note how Rags' current argument has fundamentally changed here. He now suggests that Skitty Bitty is aware that the comments they showed are relatively tame and non-triggered, the opposite of his previous position. Because of this new understanding, SB is actually dumb for comparing the aforementioned comments to anti-SJW triggered feminists videos. See, some of the feminist subjects of those videos were not calm or tame, meaning they deserve the triggered label while SB's comments do not. There is an honest way to make this argument. Rags could, for instance, play out SB's video and say, this video appears to be making one of 2 possible arguments, here's why both possibilities are wrong. What he has done instead is spend the first few minutes of his video making an argument he knows he doesn't believe, that Skitty Bitty is dumb for thinking that their comments denote anger because he actually believes Skitty Bitty was making the opposite argument. It's possible that he's doing this out of laziness. It does take extra words to structure an argument honestly, but this does have the convenient effect of implying he's refuted 2 points when in fact he has at best refuted 1. At some point I might elaborate on this specific issue, as it's something of a common feature on his podcast. Arguments are usually finished at about the middle of the sentence, so let's pause there. But on top of this silliness, it seems Rags may be suffering from a touch of memory loss. That, or he's hedging his bets that nobody paid attention to his word choice.
Have you seen some of those videos?
Sure, there have absolutely always been examples of feminists acting unhinged. They are humans after all, and humans often do that sort of thing. But the language of triggeredness is used for a lot more than just people acting incredibly inappropriate, something you could find out pretty easily with that handy-dandy keyboard of yours. Take, for example, these videos. In this video, the triggered feminists who forced Kleenex to change the name of their tissues is actually one person, and these are the comments that they made. Interesting. Comes off a fair bit nicer than the comments Rags read out earlier, but alright. In this video, Michael Knowles triggers a woke feminist. Let's see her flip her shit and start throwing things.
It only takes a couple extra syllables to use inclusive language.
To include who?
It seems to include people who don't identify as women but can become pregnant.
Odd. Seemed like a fairly normal level of conversational annoyance there. Let's try another. In this case, a feminist actually does get a little bit mad. Let's hear why.
It always goes back to that old adage, sticks and stones may break my bones, but there will always be something to offend a feminist.
Peter
Well,
Lloyd.
no, that's just obnoxious.
Peter
Sorry,
Lloyd
you
and
have
Kate
to, you
Smith.
have to
Wait,
give me a
I think
chance
we'll
to
let you
respond to
carry
that.
on this
That is
discussion.
ridiculous. No, hang on, I won't do your show again if you don't let me respond
Go
to
on,
that.
Kate.
So the anti-feminist was deliberately antagonizing her, and she responded appropriately to the fact she was being cut off. Isn't it just crazy how triggered all these feminists are? But okay, maybe this one's a winner. Let's see how this feminist crashes out. Except, wait, let's not do that because there are actually no feminists featured in this video. As you can hopefully gather, there are a wide variety of available examples of dim-witted anti-feminists nonsensically calling people triggered because they struggle to form coherent arguments, and so it would be entirely reasonable for a person to be frustrated at how often that label is used. One might even compare what anti-feminists are willing to call triggeredness to the way that they themselves behave. Just for shits and giggles, let's look at one more example by replaying a clip from a video I posted a few months ago.
For context, he was responding to the following clip.
In this emergency that we're in, I think that behooves artists to come out and speak for Kamala against Donald Trump, because he is an existential threat to the country. What do you say to that?
You know what? I don't get too deep into politics. I think voting is an individual choice. And I think that you're right. You have to look at the reality of the country that we are and the country that we want to be. And that's it. And that's what you vote based off of. Who you highlight and how you choose to highlight it on whatever platform you have is your prerogative.
Yes. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that's the way. That's really, you know.
Now, here's Jeremy's response. He made these ugly cows so mad. Major respect for not bending the knee. All right, a little weird. Didn't feel like they got especially mad there.
There are a few examples of anti-feminist videos SB shows on screen to make their point from very hinged creators like Mark Dice and Thunderfoot, but since Rags doesn't address them, neither will I. Moving on, let's let Rags speak again.
Hold it there, gotta cut you off because I need to read the text that you flashed on screen. And I don't know if you want me to listen to your voice or if you want me to read what you put on screen, so we're just going to have to do one at a time. All right, you did the thing again where I don't know if I'm supposed to listen to you or if I'm supposed to pause your video and read the text you've put at the bottom instead of you just having the text be something you say as a part of your video.
I somehow doubt that I'm the only person who finds this kind of shit insufferable, but maybe it's unfair of me to expect a person who's been on YouTube since 2014 to understand basic genre conventions.
This clip is the source of one of the most famous triggered feminist pictures, and it's a single frame from a completely reasonable conversation. This is mostly true. You can check out the original conversation in multiple forms. It's easy to find. But yeah, she's not being super crazy or anything. She's just expressive, and it was paused on an unflattering frame. However, this woman here being sort of used as the face of triggered feminism, even if it was not really fairly done or if it was taken out of context, doesn't really have any bearing whatsoever on the rest of this video.
Yes, the fuck it does have a bearing on this video. You played them criticizing the overuse of the label of triggered earlier, and here they are giving an example of that label being misused en masse. I know that he does this on live streams, but I am impressed that even in edited videos, Rags instantly forgets sentences he just heard seconds ago whenever it suits his argument. He spends several minutes going on about how specific feminists were crazy in the 2010s, and regardless of whether I agree or disagree with his points, I think I've made my case that despite there being examples of ridiculous behavior, people on his side of the discussion would frequently flatly lie or misrepresent feminists to claim they were acting inappropriately when in fact they were not. After all that, he says this.
Yeah, the SJWs of the time, as well as today's gender-obsessed lefty weirdos in particular, pull from this same playbook. They are extremely censorious. They seem to have no respect for the concept of expression that exists outside of gender expression, and are willing to silence detractors, dox people, threaten them, go out of their way to make aggressive action towards things they do not like. They are authoritarians wearing the mask of tolerance, and it has been immensely satisfying to watch their kind fail and be culturally rejected, though this is obviously still an ongoing process.
He gives us a rant about gender-obsessed lefty weirdos. Isn't that fun? What he doesn't give are any examples. Of course, why would he? That would require effort. I'm repeatedly told by people of Rags's general persuasion that there's this mythical cult of people who are obsessed with gender and nothing else. These vile authoritarians hiding in the shadows, but oddly, they rarely show examples of such behavior, and when they manage to actually do it, they love to show you individual tweets with single-digit likes, because no shit, there are like 12 of these people out there. I could show examples of this, but why would I, right? Rags doesn't need evidence to construct his fantasy, so why should I provide any evidence to dismantle it? I think Christopher Hitchens said that. In fact, scratch everything that I said in response to this argument. I'll refute Rags's argument much more succinctly. Nuh-uh.
But then, look at the infamous Starfield pronouns rant, where the mere option to choose whether your character is referred to as he, she, or they sends this grown man into a frothing rage.
Sorry, did you want to get immersed in our world? Yeah, well, guess what? Fucking pronouns!
The fact you've called it the infamous Starfield rant is interesting, considering that the rant made a year ago was mocked at the time, but fast forward today, and it seems that we've had already 2 massive projects that chose to make character pronouns specifically featured, Dragon Age the Veilguard and Concord, and have resulted in hundreds of millions of dollars in losses, hundreds of layoffs, and titanic cultural derision.
Let's pay attention to diction for a second here.
2 massive projects that chose to make character pronouns specifically featured, and have resulted in hundreds of millions of dollars in losses, hundreds of layoffs, and titanic cultural derision.
Now, I could be charitable and assume that Rags didn't mean to say something this monumentally stupid, that by featuring pronouns resulted in financial failure, he actually meant something much more thoughtful and nuanced. But why bother, right? He just fucking said that 2 video games failed because they featured pronouns. I'm not going to attempt to explain the real-world reasons that video games often fail, because I'm willing to assume that this little audience I've got here lives in the real world. That said, his argument is so nonsensical that it can be refuted in literally 3 words: Baldur's Gate 3.
And as far as Starfield itself goes, the subject of Az's rant, the reception for that seems to have been overwhelmingly that the game is stale, boring, nonsensical, and immensely disappointing.
Note how none of the overwhelming consensus you claimed had anything to do with pronouns. It seems, even assuming the majority of gamers agree with you that the game is bad, they think it's bad for substantive, important reasons, and not embarrassing ones like having too many options on the character creator.
Az's rant is a bit cringe, sure, but he's right. The point that he was saying is that the inclusion of specific modern-day politics into fictional worlds can shatter immersion and make escapism difficult, especially with the hefty baggage that the obsession with pronouns by the left today carries, and how they treat those who don't want to engage with those discussions, even apathetically.
I like video games. I haven't played Starfield, nor do I particularly intend to, but I do enjoy myself a good RPG here and there. I imagine that a few of the people watching this do too. Anyone who likes these sorts of games understands that the character creation screen is essentially always immersion breaking. That's how character creators fucking work. Nobody playing Starfield thinks that in the real world you get to physically sculpt your face before popping into existence, or choose from an optional set of predetermined backgrounds. Even one of my favorite games of all time, Fallout New Vegas, a game which works very hard to immerse the player in its character creator, still necessarily breaks immersion by forcing the player to type in their name, choose their skills, and add optional traits. An option to choose your pronouns in, say, New Vegas would make the game precisely 0% less immersive. Or let's go back to the classics. Tell me, do you think that Fallout 2 would break your immersion if its character creator had a pronouns option? And just as a follow-up question, are you insane?
Here, just as everywhere, you don't have to travel far until you find a related example of the left's position on censorship and the mitigation of expression. Nexus mods will ban mods that simply remove the pronoun options, because these people seek to control you. They seek to control how you can speak, what you can express, and how you can express it.
Once again, if Rags had made an actual argument here, I'd have something to refute. But as it stands, all he said is Nexus Mods has a terms of service, which means they want to control your speech and expression. By this logic, because again, he doesn't give any sort of caveats here, any mod removal is an attempt to make real-world 1984. Removing sexual abuse material, evil censorship. Removing material that includes real-world violence, basically the end of days. It couldn't be that Nexus Mods simply doesn't want to be associated with explicit anti-trans prejudice, which is the only feasible reason to go out of your way to make your game even more restrictive. It couldn't be that even if Nexus Mods wanted to, they couldn't control what you do on other websites. It must be a Machiavellian attempt to compel speech and trans the masses. I'm going to assume that Rags isn't actually insane enough to believe these things. He's just too lazy to make an argument. That said, I do have to give him an ounce of credit for one single thing he did actually put effort into, though you can probably tell that that compliment is a little bit backhanded.
Imagine for a moment that this was a decade ago, 2015, peak BuzzFeed. Imagine a feminist foaming at the mouth over the option to wear skimpy, overly sexualized outfits. But that did happen, you cry. But no, it didn't.
I don't know how old you are, but you clearly do not remember a lot of recent internet culture. Or you're just stupid. Or an ideologue. Or both.
Not a single person complaining about booby armor in video games ever screamed the way this man does, ever got as triggered as he did.
Anita and her ilk never got as triggered as Az did, All right. On September the 24th, 2015.
You can probably see where this is going. He's going to show us an example of someone in Anita's circle acting triggered like Babyface did. If you guessed that that was what he was going to do, you're stupid. What he actually does instead is go on a 10-minute diatribe about how Anita Sarkeesian was heavily involved in and represented a UN report that cited a far-right satanic panic group that believes shit like Pokemon causes violence and the Lord of the Rings is corrupting the youth. Now, assuming all of his research is correct, is this embarrassing for the people involved in the report? Yes, absolutely. But if you'll remember earlier in the video, Rags described triggered feminists as crazy, unhinged people who yell and scream and do things like pull fire alarms and harass people. That is the standard that he has set for what triggered means. Babyface's rant would, of course, meet about 75% of his definition. He didn't do anything in public or, like, harass anyone in specific, but he was unhinged and screamy and the like. Regardless, Rags suggested that he was about to show us an example of Anita's people acting triggered like Babyface. But what he actually showed us was Anita's people doing a completely unrelated embarrassing thing. Once again, there is an honest version of this argument. He could, for instance, have conceded, yes, Babyface acted triggered here, but I think that Anita Sarkeesian did something more substantively bad. While she never screamed about pronouns, she actually did something that I think is worse. But again, making an honest argument requires effort, and it seems the only bit of effort he's willing to put in is like a half hour of looking at cringe Christian articles. He, of course, throughout this entire thing refers to Zoe Quinn, seated next to Sarkeesian, exclusively as whore, because he's part of the cool, calm, and collected side, and not the demented douchebag side. Certainly not because even after 11 years, he's still filled with seething contempt for them. And would you believe it? We're about halfway through Rags's almost hour-long video, so this seems as good a place as any to stop for the time being. I have no specific plans to come back to this, but we shall see if a sequel is necessary. Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing if you aren't the type of person to call people whore on the internet, and don't forget to turn the oven off.